Okay, we'll move to our 10 a.m. timed item now, and that is our Agricultural Commissioner and Regional Forest Health Administrator to present us this report.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Gustafson and board members. I'm Kerri Timmer. I am the Regional Forest Health Coordinator for the county. And I want to thank you for allowing me the time this morning to bring you up to speed, briefly update you with this informational item on how things have been going with the program for the past 9 months. So we have been active since May 3rd, which was my first day at the county. Excuse me, and every day since then, I have learned something new about the incredible world of forestry and wildfire prevention in the county. And so I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of where we stand. So just some brief background for anybody who is in the room or perhaps listening in who may not be familiar with the program and its beginnings. Forest health and wildfire risk reduction have clearly been top priorities of this board for many years. And as a reflection of that priority, last year you created this position in this program and filled it starting in May. The position sits within the Agricultural Commissioner's Office, and I think that's largely a recognition of the fact that we're connected to both natural resources and people and communities. So that seems like a logical place for the position to reside. And I do believe it's the first program of its kind at the county level, and I hope that if somebody has different information, you'll tell me so I stop saying this. But for the time being, we do believe we are the first county with this kind of position, and either way, we do hope to serve as a model for other forested communities throughout California and other forested western states. Oops, I forgot I've got to do two things at once. Okay, multitasking. So this is just an explanation or illustration, rather, of the importance of this issue to your board. You have made it a top priority in your annual legislative platform for 2 or 3 years running now. And so I am here basically as a result of this priority. So in recognition of the importance of forest health and wildfire issues, the county has already created quite a number of strategic plans and action plans and so forth that deal with different pieces, parts and pieces, from biomass to the CAL FIRE Strategic Fire Plan to the Sierra Nevada Conservancy State of the Forests. And then even internally within the county, we have many plans, including wildfire protection plans, local hazard mitigation plans, a whole biomass strategy that we believe needs to be a little bit refreshed and updated. But these are all a testament to the great work that has already been going on for years and that continues to be done by county departments and our partners. So really the trick now is to figure out how to knit these together. How can we collectively integrate and amplify each other's goals and more effectively coordinate activities across our different departments and partner work? And so all of this effort, of course, just to reiterate, both individually and collectively, is geared toward protecting lives, property, and important resources by reducing the risk of uncharacteristically large and damaging wildfires. And let me be clear, not all wildfire is bad. We need wildfire. Our whole ecological system is based on it. It helps to regenerate certain plants. So we're not saying that all fire is bad, but we have been experiencing, as you all know, these incredibly damaging and uncharacteristic fires, including the first 2 fires in anybody's knowledge, again, that I'm aware of, that have gone up and over the Sierra Crest. We always assumed that was a natural fire break. That no longer is the assumption that we can make. So we do have an overall strategy for how to start knitting these different programs and goals together, and I think it's reflected as clearly as we can at the moment in this 3-ringed diagram, where basically the best defense is a strong offense. So that quote often gets attributed to sports figures. I think Michael Jordan, even Jack Dempsey, the boxer back in the day, but I think it actually dates back to President Washington. So it seems like it's stood the test of time, and I think it's a strategy that certainly makes sense for us. So clearly we need to protect lives and property from the dangers of these massive wildfires, and that's why the home hardening and defensible space activities have the central location at the center of this ring. But if we can also go on the offensive and proactively stop these uncharacteristic fires, keep them from starting in the first place, or at least minimize the severity of them, then we're even more protected at all levels. So building a strong offense, then, is the work of the next 2 rings. the wildland-urban interface, and the landscape level restoration. So that second ring for the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI, as we refer to it, and that's where the residential development comes right up adjacent to the forest lands. This work consists of a few different things. First of all, reducing the fuel load, just minimizing the amount of fuel that exists that can fuel these fires. Specifically creating fuel breaks around communities, and we'll talk in a minute about how we've seen that work in other major fires from last summer. Also, this work ensures that there's sufficient access for firefighting resources, a safe place where firefighters and their equipment can gather and can launch their offensive efforts, and protecting, of course, evacuation routes should we need to get residents or business people or recreationists out of areas where fires are occurring. And then the outside ring, the third ring, is the landscape level restoration and fuel treatments. And the goal of this activity is to make forests actually more resilient so that they can withstand fire and other disturbances and not turn into these huge conflagrations. So to do that, we also reduce excess fuel in the forest. It also provides safe staging areas for firefighting. And we also try to, to decrease the density, the number of trees in a given location, in the hopes that the fire will not crawl up the trees and get into the treetops, which is where it can really explode and really spread much more quickly and much further, where sparks fly and start fires out that then merge back with the mother fire, so to speak, and that's how these things get so big and out of control so quickly. So we saw that we can reap benefits from this kind of restoration and fuel work just last summer in the Caldor fire. So there were a couple of landscape level forest treatments similar to what we're talking about that either changed the fire behavior or provided one of these safe locations for firefighters to operate from. And in both cases ended up protecting specific communities. So there is proof that this activity does work and can have an impact, not necessarily in every single case, but certainly in many cases. And anything that we can do to protect lives and property and resources seems to me we need to be focusing on. So just as one example, there was a project on Highway 50 between Camino and Echo Summit. It was called Fire Adapted 50. It was a project led by the El Dorado and Georgetown Resources Conservation District, among many other partners and funders. And it consisted of some mechanical thinning and mastication, which is in essence a machine that grinds up the material and sort of spreads it on the ground typically. And all of that by way of reducing the ground fuels and increasing the spacing between the trees, as we just talked about. And it did indeed keep the fire from getting into the treetops where it could spread. It helped reduce the flame height, and so that the flames weren't crawling up the trees as high and therefore not getting into the treetop or the crown. And it gave firefighters a place to stage their efforts that ended up specifically protecting Sly Park and Pollock Pines. So we have seen this actually work. The county already has a number of amazing neighborhood and community level programs in place, thanks to the Fire Safe Councils and the Firewise communities, our own Resource Conservation District chipping programs, the CAL FIRE Strategic Fire Plan. So we do have a number of great plans in place for how to deal with that initial center circle. And now the county's really creating a complementary program that can help manage the forest and landscape level activities in that third ring, and then also help coordinate between, because whatever we do in one of those rings is going to affect the benefits to the other two. And once again, leading us to the idea that the best defense is a good offense. So to build that offense, all these football references, I guess I got the Super Bowl on my brain. The Regional Forest Health Program has been involved in 5 key areas. So first is really an example of what this landscape level activity looks like, and you've heard a lot about this project, of course, and that's French Meadows. And as it turns out, my first day coincided with basically the start of the field season for that project, so that became a primary effort in the initial months of my service. But just as a reminder for people who may not be familiar, French Meadows is a public-private partnership where the county is working with the United States Forest Service, with our partner agency, the Placer County Water Agency, also some other stakeholders, including Sierra Nevada Conservancy, a state agency they are, the Nature Conservancy, American River Conservancy, which are two private conservation kinds of organizations, and UC Merced, which is conducting a bit of a academic exercise to look at how the impact on hydrology that these different forest treatments may have. So it's a really amazing partnership doing great work. We've finished 3 field seasons, and I think I will be back in front of you at another point in a couple of months where I can give you the full synopsis of where we stand with that project, but just suffice it to say we're roughly halfway through. So that's the good news. We have had some interesting challenges revolving mostly around really extreme fire weather that obviously we've had over the past 2 summers that somewhat restricted the number of days that we could be out in the field working. But we are collaborating with the Forest Service and our other partners to figure out ways to address that in the coming seasons in the hopes that we can decrease the risk of our activities in terms of fire danger and therefore allow us to be doing more work. So that's an ongoing activity. So the next steps for that body of work really is preparing for this upcoming season, seeking funds to complete the remaining work, and then identifying the next project. What do we do after French Meadows? There is life after French Meadows, I have been promised. So then the second major area that we've been working in, excuse me, is really building the program itself, because we're sort of building it as we go, building it as we fly it, however that metaphor goes. So, the first month, again, was really just getting the lay of the land and starting to get a better understanding of the county's goals and current activities. And then the next 6 months was spent primarily for me working on the French Meadows project, and then also beginning the process of introductions and relationship building with other county departments and with our important external partners to sort of just bring all these ideas together. It's really only been in the past 2 months, I'd say, December and January, where we've been able to really shift more into what I think was envisioned for this position at the beginning, which was more of an overarching coordination role. And that's been super exciting, and I can really point to 2 specific things and people that made this shift possible, and that is just basically related to getting some more staffing support for the overall program work. So the first thing we did was applied for a Civic Spark Fellow. So Civic Spark is a part of the AmeriCorps program. It's geared specifically to providing additional capacity to local governments to get work done that they otherwise wouldn't, related to community sustainability. And so we were luckily very successful in getting an awesome person, Phoebe Rogers, who I hope is joining us via Zoom today. And she'll be with us for a total of 11 months, working primarily on trying to identify the nexus areas between those different plans that you saw on the earlier slide to figure out where really the Regional Forest Health Program can step in and help augment the activities that are already taking place. And then she's also doing some research on biomass regulations and technology with our partner, the Air Pollution Control District. So we're very excited to have Phoebe with us. And then secondly, Patty Armenteros, who's here in the room with us. Patty, if you could stand up and introduce yourself. Well, I'll introduce you, but this is Patty. She came to us after 8 years with Health and Human Services as a senior staff services analyst, and she has changed my life. So we, thanks to Patty and Phoebe, we have truly been able to take on some of the bigger picture issues that I think were envisioned for this position at its beginning. We have a third major program area that we've been engaged with, particularly with other members of the county departments, but also some external groups as well that are looking at the potential for biomass utilization across the county and in various shapes and sizes, but all by means of disposing of this forest material that we're trying to remove, the fuel reduction activities, as well as the, unfortunately now, astronomical amount of residential green waste that we know is out there, which was there to begin with because the county previously has done such a great job of getting people to do their defensible space and to limit fuel around their own properties, but we just don't have the places to take this material. There are some statewide regulations about trying to divert green waste from landfills that have affected what we can do with this material. There's emission reductions kinds of regulations from the state that and goals that we're also trying to meet. So it's just critical that we solve this problem. And I'm here to tell you that there are many, many, many minds that are working on this as we speak. We also are working with some external partners, Placer County Water Agency, the Air Pollution Control District. There's a Tahoe Basin Biomass Task Force, kind of a more informal group that's gathering. And then I also sit on a couple of statewide working groups and task forces that are looking into these issues. So there's a lot of work. I think Placer County is in a great position to be, again, a model kind of out on the front edge of these discussions and activities. So I look forward to myself and probably many other of your departmental staff coming back with new ideas throughout the year about what we can do relative to biomass. The fourth major area is community and agency fire mitigation. I'm still learning more about how kind of each department is conceptualizing these activities relative to each department's goals and missions, but really the overall goal is to determine how our program can help augment or otherwise support the great community-based work that's happening already. And that's largely through departments like Office of Emergency Services, our Planning Services Department, our Public Works and Environmental Engineering, Parks and Open Space, the RCDs, our incredible partnership with CAL FIRE. I mean, there's just, again, no shortage of activity that needs to be learned about and hopefully coordinated so that we can augment each other's outcomes. And then the fifth and final area really that we've gotten into so far is advocacy. And that's helping to provide subject matter expertise, answer questions, review legislation or regulatory proposals for whatever impacts they might have on forest health and wildfire risk reduction. So when it comes to what's next, it feels like there's an awful lot current that just needs to be continued. And dealt with in more depth, I suppose. But I just wanted to share with you this graphic. After holding about 30 introductory meetings with yourselves and with departmental representatives and partners, and putting all my notes together, this word cloud is what came out, and I think it helps give a sense of what your goals and expectations are, and our partners and other departments in the county. Goals and expectations might be for this regional forest health program. So you'll see an emphasis on, obviously, forests, funding, no surprise, projects, wildfire, partners, opportunities, and the one that I loved the best was work. So along with the French Meadows project, again, the primary areas that we'll be continuing on in this coming year are the other four that we just outlined. But there are a couple of key tasks that I hope to launch pretty immediately as soon as we can. One is developing a countywide plan. So I want to add a plan to that first slide that will help guide future landscape level work to complement the plans and the strategies that have already been developed for the neighborhood and community-based planning. And we envision this plan to really have two major components, and it's more of an interactive concept as opposed to necessarily a fully written plan. But the one tool that I'm super interested in is an interactive mapping tool that I have seen a couple of different examples of, where you can layer information on different things, such as projects that have already been accomplished in the county and where they sit on the map, the infrastructure that we need to protect, where our residential areas are, our community resources, our transportation corridors, the things that we know we need to be protecting. And you layer that with data about conditions on the ground relative to fire risk and danger and hazard and other types of conditions, fuel loading, things like that. And suddenly, these, I don't want to use the word hotspots, that would be a terrible analogy, but these priority areas start to emerge and can help us prioritize where we want to seek investment and where we want to be working with our partners. There might be gaps, even areas where it would be critically important to do work, but there isn't really an entity or an organization that is active in that area. So what does that mean for the county? How can we help support, maybe even the creation of an organization that can start taking on some of these projects in those areas? And then related to that is a project pipeline. which is kind of a best practice, I think, especially with the amount of money that we know is going to be coming from federal and state resources, to have a list of projects that we know are either ready to go and just need funding, or that we know our partners are really interested in, priority projects for our partners, that we can then start matching those up with funding sources as we become aware of them. And it also really helps set the stage and provide context and justification for future funding requests. So if we, for example, the county is advocating for, more funding to be put toward the Sierra Nevada Conservancy or CAL FIRE for these kind of projects, we have a way that we can, show what the need is. So that's an important activity that I hope we can undertake. And we will also, of course, continue seeking funding. We've when I added this up, it was a bit surprising, but we've submitted 9 funding requests since May, and actually most of them since December. So we will continue to do that and keep our fingers crossed that some of these will come through. Many of them have been for French Meadows to complete that project so we can look at it in its entirety as a pilot. But some of them, one of them at least, to the Sierra Nevada Conservancy has also been about this idea of a countywide plan and interactive map. So I just want to close with this thought, with my great thanks to our PIO office and to Document Services, who somehow pulled this concept out of my brain. But if our watercourses are the county's circulation system, then our forests are its DNA. That's how I'm thinking about it. It's our lifeline. They connect us as we travel from one part of the county to another. They provide many benefits and are used in many different ways. And ultimately, they define our way of life in Placer County. And that's why it's so important to protect them, because protecting the forests from this large, damaging, crazy wildfires that we've been seeing is protecting our communities and neighborhoods, and vice versa. So I hope this helps give you a sense of what's been going on for the past 9 months, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerri. Appreciate that. Any questions, board members?
I do. Wrong button. I do.
Yes, Supervisor.
Great work, great presentation. As you know from talking to me, my perspective is that there needs to be a massive amount of resource applied to creating a circumstance where our forest can become healthy again after being neglected for 50, probably 100 years. So specifically to the project, the French Meadows project, if we're about halfway through the treatment part of it, then we're going to transition into hopefully the maintenance part of it. So could you update me some on that? I mean, once we make a forest the way it looked 100 years ago by thinning, et cetera, then we're going to have to maintain that. Otherwise, it's going to grow over again in 50 or 100 years, and we'll be right back where we started before. So where are we with the plans for the maintenance thereafter, and what does that look like?
Most immediately, there's a plan for a great deal of prescribed burning that would come back and be applied in the same acres where the mechanical treatments have been occurring over the past 3 years so far. So that's really the first step. And then after that, to be honest, it feels like it's a regulatory issue in a lot of ways, because right now we can seek funding for a project, we can complete the project, we are expected to monitor the project, but there's no funding for, typically little to no funding for ongoing maintenance, because the folks who have the money want to go off and do the next project that makes the forest look like it did 100 years ago. So I think it'll be partly continuing on the advocacy path and trying to identify ways where perhaps some maintenance money can be included in an initial grant, maybe held like an escrow account, for example. I mean, this is just an idea. It's not been vetted anywhere except in my brain. But I think there are potential tools that we could offer and talk about from a legislative and regulatory perspective with the funding agencies. And then in addition to that, I think it's creative thinking in terms of how we package the maintenance activities. I mean, they are projects in and of themselves, and if we can get the timing right, I think we can make the case for these maintenance projects being a bigger bang for the buck even than the original projects, because it's like insurance. You are maintaining and supporting the work and the investment that you've already made. So it's not an easy question for sure, and would always be open to ideas.
Kind of makes me think what might be useful, you might have it already, but if we're going to take responsibility for our behavior, the largest property owner by far, I'm thinking, of course, is the National Forest, the federal government. Therefore, the funding in the long run should be targeted towards that. So maybe just running some numbers on those kinds of things as it relates to Placer County. If we are going to be this model that, you know, like over a 50-year period, there should be a federal obligation for their taking care of, just like we take care of our homes, and thereby the public policy that would follow from that, the benefit of avoiding catastrophic forest fires, the quality of the air that would be improved, the diminishing of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of catastrophic forest fires. That might be a great white paper to take back to Washington.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And we are actually continuing to meet with our local and regional and national Forest Service leaders to bring up ideas like this about just how do we move forward most effectively, in part because of some of the challenges that we've been experiencing, but this is certainly one of them. The fact that we do all this great work. You know, I'm not going to be around in 50 years. You might, but but you know, it's hard now to kind of set up for that unless we're thinking it through in advance through advocacy and policy. So thank you for that. It's a great idea.
Any other comments? Supervisor
Yeah,
Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Kerri, first of all, I'm just pleased with the hard work you've done since you hit the ground running. Putting all the pieces together is really a tremendous challenge, and I appreciate that, and look forward to you continuing doing that. As far as, you know, one of the problems that Supervisor Wygant brought forward about how do we maintain this, and I think you brought up prescribed burn, and now that the forest is clean and relatively healthy, I think prescribed burn would be a lot safer now that there's not all this forest waste on the ground. So that would be one option. And certainly when we go back to, and I've done this before, when we go to DC or when I speak to RCRC, for example, I always bring up the French Meadows project because it is a trendsetter. It is a very nice, how collaborative everybody works together to reach a common goal. And so I continue to do that, and we need to just keep the pressure on and let everybody know what the good work we're doing here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I do want to just say that the Nature Conservancy, who's one of the partners on the project, has a separate agreement with the Forest Service to do, I want to say, roughly 6,000 to 7,000 acres of prescribed burning that would come in after the mechanical treatment that's currently taking place. Because you're right, it's easier and far safer to do a prescribed burn activity on ground that's already been somewhat cleared of ladder fuels. So that is a big part of this project's plan, and hopefully will be going forward as well.
Thank you. My only comment, I'm not seeing others. Kudos, thank you for coming here, and kudos to our board for taking this huge step in making this a high priority focus for us. I want to make sure all of our county properties live up to the standards that our communities deserve. And I hear repeated comments from various property owners that there's county property not maintained. So I want to make sure, with your wisdom and leadership, you know, what those costs are, and then make sure as we're looking at our budget for 22, 23, that's on Placer County to allocate those funds and make that a high priority for us, to show examples of how we are walking the walk with our community members, because we're asking a lot of them, and we need to set that example. So
Thank you.
any insights on that and budget recommendations for each department, I would love to see, so that our county properties, I know we've had to take action independent of a systematic approach. I'd like to see a systematic approach to all our county properties as well. They're insignificant in the big picture of catastrophic wildfire, but they certainly set that example for all of us and for our residents to live by. So.
Well, sure, and they're kind of the connective tissue as well. So we, Josh Hunsinger has already taken the first step of getting the database of all county properties, and that would be one of the first things that we'd load into this interactive map tool if we get that project funded and are able to go down that road in some way. So yes, I think clearly that's an important issue for many reasons, not least of which the one that you brought up. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Kerri. And now I'll open it up for any public comment on this item, and I see some hands raised. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Brennan Toohey, Loomis, California. Some 5 years ago or so, there was a program that was available in the county to do chipping on residential property. And I was under the impression that that chipping program was unfunded or something. And I'm wondering what the status is on that now. If you could address that, I'd certainly appreciate it.
We'll take all the public comment and then we'll answer questions, and good question. Yes.
Just going to read something here from the Board of Forestry. Call to action. Do you understand the Board of Forestry's proposed fire safe regulations under the new BOF regulations? You will not be able to pull building permits for your property if, 1, your property is located on a dead-end road with only one point of ingress/egress, including cul-de-sacs and looped roads. 2, any road leading to your property that has a tight curve within an inside radius of less than 50 feet is narrow or that is in poor condition and cannot support fire equipment that weighs at least 75,000 pounds. 3, any shared driveway for 2 or more parcels will have to be upgraded to meet road standards. 4, any driveway exceeding 150 feet does not have a turnout near the midpoint of the driveway. If any driveway exceeds 800 feet, it must have 2 turnouts no more than 400 feet apart. 5, your parcel is 1 acre or larger, but does not have the minimum 30 feet setback for all buildings from all property lines and or the center of the road. If your property is underinsured and burns down with this passage, nobody will have the insurance coverage to rebuild the home. The new proposed regulations would potentially force you, as the permit applicant, to make all improvements to all roads from your lot parcel being developed to the nearest fully compliant roadway. Please send specific examples on how the proposed fire regulations would severely impact you and other property owners. We need concrete examples of real people who are either currently or in the near future going to have to meet the proposed requirements, and will not be able to do so for whatever specific reasons. We are trying to create a narrative where we can point to the proposed language and explain how this could impact lives. Written comments shall be submitted to the following address: Board of Forestry, Fire Protection, attention Edith Hennigan, Land Use Planning Program Manager, P.O. Box 944246, Sacramento. Written comments can also be hand-delivered. Contact the person listed in this notice at the following address: Board of Forestry, Fire Protection, room 1506-14, 1416 9th Street, Sacramento. We have a fax number of 916-653-0989. This is a fax number. Written comments can also be delivered via email at the following address: public comments at bof.calgov.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that earlier under public comment as well, and I was not familiar with that, so.
And that was a 45-day notice. I got 30 days ago, and I don't know the date.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask a point of clarification?
Yes.
Address it, no one knows what's going on.
Do we know what bill number that is? Is it a bill before the legislature? I just want to make sure
It's
we
a
know.
Board of Forestry vote. And,
Okay.
I gave
Yes.
Sophie.
Yes.
the-
We got a copy of this, board members, and we'll make sure that staff get it and we can look into it. Great, thank you. Any comments online, on Zoom? Oh, yes, Mr. Nader.
Morning, Chairman Gustafson, supervisors. I hadn't intended on talking, but I just wanted to check. She talked about the tremendous amount of volume of waste that has to be somehow dealt with. And over the past number of years, we've talked about Cabin Creek, and I'm not sure if you brought it up in your discussion, that biomass plant was obviously being considered and processed and would really take care of a lot of the issues up in the Tahoe Basin as far as the waste issue. The other is obviously Rio Bravo and Lincoln, and they've been obviously taking some of that, but they're restricted to some degree by the state. And so I'm just wondering, is there any way to work with the state to get more latitude to get these kind of facilities going? Because this is really, I think, the most productive way to get rid of a lot of this waste. So,
Great, thank you. Any online?
Kim, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments. Kim, go ahead and try it now.
Good morning. Thank you so much I just wanted to make a few comments, thanking the Board of Supervisors and the county for the leadership that you're taking on the forest management policies in Placer County. The French Meadows project, as stated earlier, is definitely a model program across the United States. And I just really wanted to acknowledge the work that's being done in Placer County. And I work with a lot of the rural communities. They're in forested areas. And what you're doing in Placer County is definitely a model. So thank you for what you're doing. And I just wanted to recognize that.
Thank you, Kim, and thanks for your support and Congressman McClintock's support. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay, ma'am, I'm sorry to have missed you.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. I actually wasn't planning on speaking about this either. Just curious, though, in reference to the fire insurance aspect of this and the astronomical cost of that insurance and what people are paying out and how they're losing their homes and not even being able to make it because of the cost of the insurance. So I don't know if that's a part of this big picture, but I believe it would be so. I think that should be looked into also.
And I'm sorry, we do need a name for the...
Annette Tomlin.
Thank you, Annette. Anyone else in the room that I may have inadvertently missed? Okay. Kerri, would you like to address a few of those questions? Yes.
There we go. Okay, great, thank you. So the residential chipping program is actually operated in partnership, I believe, with the Office of Emergency Services and now also with our probation department to increase the number of crews that are available to be out on the ground doing the work. So there has been a backlog. I think COVID had quite an impact, particularly on our partner, the RCD, who is the Resource Conservation District, rather, that has been working on this program as well. So I do know that it is a focus and that the county has really been working hard to try to find ways to get as many crews and equipment out on the ground as possible. And as more funding becomes available, that is certainly something that could be looked at in terms of additional equipment and additional partnerships.
Kerri, thank you. In addition, the Board of Supervisors did approve an extra supplemental funding for the chipping program this last year to try to expedite because of the backlog. So I know we approved, I want to say around 150,000 more toward that program, but we can certainly consider that moving forward. Also had the question on biomass.
Yes, so biomass also is a major effort with multiple departments in terms of specific facilities such as the construction potentially of a Cabin Creek facility or working with Rio Bravo and others. That is happening primarily through the environmental engineering department I'm sorry, not familiar with the nomenclature, but within Public Works, the environmental engineering team. And so, Cabin Creek is a facility that had been looked at previously. It didn't move forward for a variety of reasons, but I think everybody's in agreement that conditions have changed to a degree that it's worth looking at it again, and perhaps updating some of the background information and feasibility studies and fuel source studies. I think fuel is probably the least of our worries, but we do need to know, and those who might be investing in the construction of such a facility, should it move forward, also need that kind of information. So I do believe that the county is looking at the possibility, again, in combination with other things, other technologies, other ways that we can deal with this green waste. There's ideas such as portable sawmills, or or locating a sawmill at an existing industrial facility. So there are a number of opportunities that we are looking at, and we'll be continuing to review and evaluate and seek funding for, or get the board's approval if we find one that makes sense.
Supervisor Holmes, your light is on. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I know Pioneer Energy is working with Western Placer Waste Management Authority to perhaps have a biomass plant at that site. City of Auburn is looking at just starting to look at their wastewater treatment plant in Oper for a biomass project. The rural county representatives of California have formed the Golden State Natural Resources, and they're looking at biomass plants throughout Northern California. You have 2 sites, one in Lassen County, I believe, and one, I think, in Humboldt County. So anyhow, there's a lot of movement finally on biomass. As far as I'm concerned, I just want to get one of the damn things built so we can make sure that it works.
Right, and I would add to that, the Truckee-Tahoe Airport District is also looking at one in the Truckee area, as well as our staff are not just working with internal to the county, but they're working with the town of Truckee and all of the allied agencies in the Tahoe area for the Cabin Creek facility. So they're doing a pretty exhaustive look at that as well. And North Star itself, North Star Community Services District, is looking at a small one. I was really interested, I just heard a presentation on biochar and how that can be a benefit to our agricultural lands. And so that was a fascinating byproduct from biomass and potential for additional use. And so I think there's a lot of innovation happening, and we want to be at the lead of that in every way we can to move that forward. And then I don't know if you can do anything. We'll look into the gentleman's issues on that language and that warning and the comment on insurance. Kerri, this is, I think, more at our level on advocacy. I know I heard this morning at a meeting that commercial buildings have a $3 million limit in some of our, right here on 49. Property that I was made aware of just rebuilt a $7 million building and can only get $3 million of coverage through the Cal Fair plan. And so they are at risk for $4 million out of their own pocket on fire insurance. So it is, more companies are leaving, I was told today, especially on the high-end properties by a broker here in the Auburn area. And so we need to, again, talk to our insurance commissioner. It's been a continued discussion of how we make changes at his level to ensure that people can have insurance on their properties, especially if they've taken the actions necessary to protect their properties and followed the recommendations. So
I think that's a critical piece. I mean, I'm a prime example. We got the letter after 40-some years of being with the same insurer saying that they were no longer going to cover us for fire. And, we called and said, well, gosh, we've put a lot of work into our property, as have our neighbors. Can you come out and take a look, like you would if we had actually had a fire? No, we can't do that, And you get points in your favor if you're close to a fire hydrant, but you don't get points in your favor if you're downhill from an irrigation ditch, which we happen to be. So, there's just these disconnects between how the insurance company looks at things from more perhaps of an urban type perspective than the rural perspective, which is where most of these at-risk properties are. So I think there's a lot of room for advocacy at all levels about all levels of that, of those considerations that could potentially help the situation.
great, thank you. Well, great report. Oh, yes,
Just a
Supervisor Gore.
Quick question about the chipper program. Can people sign up and get on the waiting list?
Right
Yes.
now.
I just want to make sure that people are aware that you can sign up. We do have a waiting list, but we've been making progress. So,
How do you get a hold of them?
you know what? I think staff can let you know. Josh is sitting right across from you, so I'm sure he can give you an answer. Thank you, Kerri. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and one other comment is I know a lot of people in the Weimar, Alta, Dutch Flat, Forest Hill areas, because of the winter storm damage, are very concerned with the amount of debris. We are continuing to work and may consider augmenting chipping for those people that experience tremendous tree and shrub loss during the winter storms. So, thank you. Thanks, Kerri. Appreciate it, and great job. It's not even been a year.